My name's Dana Whitaker. I'm 31, live in rural Georgia, and if you'd asked anyone in my family to describe me, they'd say I'm the responsible one. That's code for, she won't complain when we dump our problems on her. I live alone in a 400 square foot tiny house I designed, saved for, and built mostly by hand. Every screw, every piece of reclaimed wood, every inch of insulation. I chose it. I laid the floors myself. I've never been more exhausted or more proud. This place saved me from a life of debt, roommates who left dishes in the sink for days, and the kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who only love the version of you they can use. My younger brother Josh, on the other hand, he's the opposite of everything I've worked for. He's 29, still lives mostly off gigs that never last more than a few weeks, and carries the kind of charm that makes people say things like, he's just figuring it out. He's been figuring it out since he was 19. When we were kids, if Josh broke something, I was the one who got grounded for not watching him. If he forgot his homework, I stayed up doing it for him. I once took the fall for a weed stash he left in Dad's truck. That was high school. Since then, I've co-signed loans, paid off parking tickets, driven across state lines at 2 a.m. when he ran out of gas, and helped him write resumes he never sent out. But the thing about being dependable is that people stop seeing you as a person. You become the fallback plan. Last Sunday, we had a family cookout at my dad's place. Gravel driveway, half-rusted grill, folding chairs sunk into uneven lawn. Josh showed up late, as always, holding a six-pack he probably didn't pay for and wearing a smile like he just solved a puzzle no one asked for. Dinner was mostly harmless. Dad told the same two stories about fishing with Uncle Pete. Mom asked if I was still doing that tiny house thing. Josh bragged about some new app idea. He was pitching to a friend of a friend. I tuned most of it out. Then, just as I reached for the last corn on the cob, Mom cleared her throat. I almost forgot, she said, too casually. Josh is going to stay with you for a little while. I paused, hand in midair. Come again? She waved it off like it was nothing. Just until he gets back on his feet. He's in between places again, and you've got all that space. All that space. In a 400 square foot house. Josh didn't say anything. He just kept sipping his beer like this was old news. Dad added, it'll be temporary, of course. You won't even notice he's there. I looked around the table. 3 pairs of eyes waited for me to agree. Not one of them asked if I had time, energy, or the actual physical space. Not one of them asked if I was okay with it. It wasn't a question. It was an announcement. Just like always. And for one wild second, I almost exploded. I felt it in my jaw first. That clenched pressure that starts when you're trying not to scream. My body knew the rage before I could even name it. But then something strange happened. I relaxed. Because I realized I didn't have to say no. I didn't have to scream or cry or prove that I was stretched too thin. I could just let them walk into their own trap. I didn't owe them a fight. Not anymore. So I smiled. Sure, I said lightly. If it helps Josh get back on his feet, I don't see why not. Josh smirked like he'd won something. Dad gave a satisfied nod. Mom looked relieved. They had no idea I hadn't lived in that tiny house in weeks. No idea I'd already handed the keys to someone else. No idea I'd stopped being the family fix-it girl the moment I realized the only time they ever knocked was when something was broken. And they were about to find out. When I got home that night, I stood in the middle of my tiny house and took a long breath. The kind of breath you take when you've just lied to everyone you're supposed to love and, somehow, it feels more honest than anything you've said in years. The place was still exactly as I'd left it. Mugs on the open shelf, my dented enamel kettle on the stove. A folded quilt I stitched by hand draped over the built-in bench under the window. Everything was clean, still, untouched. And not mine anymore. The lease had been signed last Thursday. Meryl, the woman renting it, was a retired elementary school teacher who crocheted her own curtains and cried when she saw the garden boxes I built out back. She moved in this coming Wednesday. Until then, the place sat empty, like a memory I hadn't decided whether to keep or let go. I stayed just long enough to grab the rest of my books and a few pantry items I hadn't cleared. Then I locked the door. Slowly. Quietly. I didn't look back. The cabin I was in now wasn't glamorous. It was halfway up a hill, behind a tree line off County Road 15, and didn't have much to brag about. Just one room, one bathroom, and a front porch where spiders loved to nest. But it was quiet. And more importantly, it was mine. Even if only month to month. I'd moved in 2 weeks before that barbecue, partly because I needed space, but mostly because I needed to know what it felt like to live in a place no one else had keys to. No spare set under the mat. No sibling who just needed a place for a few days. No parents with just one more ask. Just me and the humming fridge and the wind scratching against the trees at night. The next few days were surprisingly calm. Josh texted once. "Hey, should I bring my own sheets or you got extras?" I didn't reply. Mom followed up with, "Dana, let me know if you need help prepping the space. I'll swing by Thursday." I left her on read too. There was something surreal about it, watching this plan unfold around me like a stage play where I'd already exited, but the cast kept reciting their lines. It felt like watching a train speed toward a broken track and realizing you're not the one standing there anymore. And I didn't feel guilty. That surprised me the most. Because I used to carry guilt like a second skin. If Josh missed a payment, I felt like I failed. If Mom cried, I rewrote my boundaries to make her smile again. But now, for the first time in, God, maybe ever, I didn't feel like the villain in my own life. I just felt done. Saturday arrived, and with it, the text barrage began at 8:17 a.m. "Dana, we're loading Josh's stuff now. Should be there in a couple hours. Dad says bring the toolkit just in case, and the futon won't fit in the truck, so we're strapping it. Hope that's okay. Josh says he's excited. Told me he's gonna start over this time. You're giving him a real chance." Still, I didn't respond. I was already an hour outside town, walking slowly through a farmer's market I had no intention of buying from, sipping on a bitter coffee from a travel mug I hadn't washed properly. The sky was overcast, kind of humid, the kind of weather that makes you feel like something's about to happen. And it did. At 10:53 a.m., my phone started vibrating nonstop. I didn't even check the caller ID. I already knew who it was. By the fourth call, I answered. "Dana." Mom's voice was strained, thin with panic. "There's someone here, some woman. She says she lives in the tiny house. She says you don't live there anymore." I stayed quiet. "You never told us," she snapped. "You never said a word." "No," I replied. I didn't. The silence on her end was long, then muffled rustling. I could hear Dad's voice, low and sharp, probably trying to calm Josh, who I imagined was pacing like a dog locked out of the yard. "Dana?" Mom said again, this time like she was asking for something she'd never earned. "What is this?" "I sold the house," I said plainly. "Weeks ago. I moved out." "You what?" I didn't think it mattered. No one asked where I lived, so I didn't say. For a few seconds, no one said anything. I could almost see them, standing on the front porch with a half-loaded futon and Josh's duffel bag, blinking like they'd wandered onto the wrong movie set. Then came Dad's voice, sharp, rising. "You lied to us." "I didn't," I said, cool and measured. I said, "If it helps Josh get back on his feet, I don't see why not." I never said where. A sharp inhale. Maybe from Mom, maybe from Josh. "So what now?" Josh finally spoke, voice tight. "We're just supposed to figure it out?" He didn't sound angry. He sounded lost, like a boy who got left at the wrong bus stop. And for a second, something inside me softened, but not enough to let them in, because the truth was, I didn't move out to punish them. I moved out because I'd spent a decade being the net, the buffer, the built-in plan B, and I was tired of being the one everyone landed on, even when I was the one bleeding. I gave them space, but this time the space was mine, and they were never invited. I knew they'd show up. Even as I let Mom's last call drop into voicemail, even as I walked slow laps around the lake near the edge of the farmer's market, I knew it in my gut. The same way you know rain's coming before you feel the first drop. Mom wouldn't just let it go. Not because she cared where I lived, but because she couldn't stand the idea that she didn't know something I did. I gave them a whole afternoon to stew in it, drove the long way back, rolled the windows down and let the wind tangle my hair. I stopped for gas even though I didn't need any. I didn't want to go home. Not yet. Not because I was scared, just because I knew once they showed up, nothing would feel clean anymore. By the time I pulled into the gravel driveway in front of the cabin, the sun was low enough to throw gold across the pines. It was the kind of quiet that made you feel like the whole world had stepped out for a smoke break. I wasn't inside for more than 10 minutes before I heard the knock. 3 quick clipped hits, polite on the surface but sharp enough to feel like a demand. I looked through the peephole. There they were, all 3 of them. Josh was in his usual hoodie, sleeves pushed up like he was ready to move furniture. Mom's lips were pinched tight, her eyes already red around the edges, and Dad stood slightly behind them, arms crossed, that quiet thunder brewing in his jaw. Behind them, the trunk was popped open, boxes stacked, a rolled-up rug, Josh's gaming chair poking out sideways like some sad exclamation point. I opened the door halfway. "You found me," I said. Josh looked genuinely surprised, like he still hadn't fully accepted that I lived somewhere new. Mom stepped forward first. "We tried calling," she said. "You didn't answer." "I know." "We didn't think you'd actually—" She stopped, searching for words she didn't have. "We didn't think you'd be here?" I shrugged. "Well, I live here." "You said Josh could move in." "Number," I said. "If it helps him get back on his feet, I don't see why not." I never said where. That was at the old place, which, if you remember, I don't live in anymore. Josh scoffed and dropped his duffel bag on the porch like it had betrayed him. "This is petty, Dana," he said. "You always act like you're so above everybody, like you're better. But this is just cruel." I tilted my head. "You packed up your life and drove across town to move into someone's home without confirming you were welcome. That's not my cruelty. That's your assumption." His jaw clenched. "You're my sister. And you've spent years confusing that with free housing." Dad stepped in then. His voice was low, but it carried weight. "Enough. We've put up with a lot from you, Dana, but this is disrespect. We're not leaving. You owe this to your brother." There it was. The word that had always hung in the air but never landed. Away. Like I was running some invisible tab, and this, my home, my peace, my breathing room, was just another thing I'd be expected to hand over. I stepped back and grabbed my phone. "What are you doing?" Mom asked. I didn't answer. I dialed. 3 rings. 911? What's your emergency? I kept my voice calm. "Hi. I have 3 family members on my property who are refusing to leave. They're not on the lease, and they weren't invited." Mom gasped like I'd slapped her. "Dana," she whispered, voice shaking. "You're calling the police on your own family? You were asked to leave. You didn't." Dad cursed under his breath. Josh looked like he might throw something. Mom just stood there stunned. "You're going to regret this," Josh snapped. "You know what people will say about you?" I nodded. "Yeah. They'll say I finally stopped opening the door." They didn't speak after that. Not while I gave the dispatcher the address. Not while I waited. 10 minutes later, a black and white cruiser pulled up the hill. The officer was a woman, maybe in her 40s. Calm eyes, hand near her belt, but relaxed. "Evening," she said. "We got a call about trespassing?" "That was me," I said. She looked from me to them. "Ma'am, sir," she said evenly to my parents. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. This is a private residence. You're not permitted to be here without consent." Josh looked like he might cry, or swing, or both. "You don't mean this, Dana," Mom said softly. You used to be kind. I didn't flinch. And you used to ask. She blinked. Dad muttered something under his breath. The officer stepped closer. We can walk you to your vehicle if you'd like, she said. That's when they finally moved. Quiet. No shouting, no final words, just the rustle of box flaps and gravel underfoot. They drove off with Josh's stuff still strapped to the roof, and I stood on my porch, holding my phone like a shield I never thought I'd have to use. But I did, because sometimes the only way to keep your space is to defend it. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Not because I couldn't sleep, because for the first time in a long time, I actually had. Deep, uninterrupted sleep. No texts pinging in the middle of the night. No vague dread sitting on my chest. Just silence. Real, earned silence. I made coffee in the little metal French press I brought from the old house. It sputtered like always, and the mug chipped at the rim warmed my hands in a way that reminded me life didn't need to be perfect. It just had to be mine. Then the text started. 12 missed calls. 5 from Mom. 2 from Dad. The rest were numbers I didn't recognize, but I didn't need to. Cousins, family friends, people I hadn't heard from in years. And then came the messages. Why would you do this to your brother? Your mom is devastated. Josh is sleeping in his truck like a stray dog. Are you proud of that? No one asked if I was okay. Not one message said, "What happened?" or "Do you need anything?" It was all, "How dare you? What kind of daughter are you?" You owe them. That word again. Owe. Like my existence was a line of credit I'd defaulted on. Like love only counts if you bleed for it. I should have ignored it. Let it pass. Let them spiral in their own stories the way they always had. But then I saw it. A Facebook post. Public. From Mom. 3 paragraphs. A photo of Josh when he was 5 in the red hoodie he wore until it had holes in the sleeves. And the caption? A slow knife. We raised both our children to look out for each other. One of them still remembers what family means. The other, we don't know who she is anymore. We're not perfect, but we're hurting. And we didn't deserve this. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was shocked, but because it was so familiar. That carefully worded plea, that weaponized heartbreak, that unspoken message. She did this to us. Feel bad for us. Turn on her. The comments piled in. People I hadn't seen since grade school. People who only knew me as the quiet one, chiming in with opinions like they knew a damn thing about my life. So sad what success does to people. Money really changes your heart. Some people forget where they came from. And that was the moment something cracked. Not the way things crack when they break, but the way they crack when something finally opens and lets the air in. I opened my phone. I didn't draft. I didn't second guess. I just started screenshotting. The $2,000 transfer I made to help cover the mortgage when Dad was laid off. My name on the loan for Josh's Jeep. The one he stopped paying 6 months in. The one that tanked my credit for 2 years. The invoice from the lawyer I paid to handle Josh's first DUI. The text from Mom saying, "Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin our name." The rent receipts from the old house where Josh lived temporarily for 14 months without paying a single dime. And then, my favorite, an old message from Josh, 2 years ago after I told him he couldn't crash on my couch anymore. "You're such a boring robot. Nobody likes being around you unless they need something." I posted it all. No caption. No hashtags. Just evidence. And then one final message in bold black text. I didn't abandon my family. I just stopped volunteering for emotional debt. I locked my phone and left it on the table. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't care about the noise anymore. I wasn't looking for applause. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for peace. And I had it. That afternoon, I sat on the porch and watched the wind move through the trees. Meryl, the woman renting my tiny house, texted me a photo of the garden box I'd built, now filled with fresh rosemary and wildflowers. She said she'd named it the Quiet Box. I smiled, not because it was poetic, but because it was real. Someone else found healing in the space I had once fought so hard to keep. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about saying no. This wasn't even about Josh or my parents. This was about reclaiming a life that had been slowly carved away in tiny, polite pieces. Every sure. Every it's okay. Every time I swallowed what I needed to keep someone else from falling apart. No more. Because I wasn't cruel. I wasn't cold. I was done performing. A week passed. The post didn't just land. It detonated. I didn't check the comments. I didn't have to. My cousin Melissa sent me a text that just said, "Damn, Dana." And my aunt, Mom's older sister who always stayed out of family business, left a heart on the screenshot of Josh's DUI lawyer invoice. But the real shift came when Mom deleted her post. No apology, no update. Just gone, like she thought she could scrub away the mess and pretend it hadn't happened. That was her way. Rewrite the scene, swap the villain, move on like the fire didn't start in her hands. Josh, on the other hand, went loud. He posted on his own page, a rant. Something about betrayal and blood being thicker and how he was being smeared by someone who thinks being alone makes her better than the rest of us. That lasted about 24 hours. Then someone, I still don't know who, dug into his GoFundMe history. Turned out he had 3 active fundraisers in the past year. One for emergency dental work, one for moving expenses, and one just titled Fresh Start. All of them had the same pattern. Friends and acquaintances gave what they could, and Josh would vanish. It started circulating on Reddit, then on a local Facebook group. A few former roommates chimed in. A girl he used to date dropped receipts for utilities he never paid, and how he left her dog locked outside one night because he was too high to remember. Suddenly, the story wasn't just mine. People started putting it together themselves. He shut down all his socials 2 days later. That should have been enough. And for a while, I thought it was. Until the knock came again. This time, it wasn't him. It was a deputy from the county court. Josh had tried to dispute the lease transfer of the tiny house. Claimed I'd fraudulently evicted him even though he never paid rent, never signed anything, and hadn't lived there a single day. The claim was baseless, but it forced a hearing. And so I sat in a small beige courtroom on a Thursday morning opposite my own brother, listening to him tell a judge that he was promised a home, that he had nowhere to go, that I had acted out of spite. I didn't bring a lawyer. I didn't need one. I brought paperwork, lease agreement, text messages, date-stamped move-out documents, photos of the empty house with time tags, Meryl's signed affidavit confirming the day she moved in, and that Josh had never been a resident. Josh's voice cracked as he tried to explain how families shouldn't need contracts. The judge leaned forward and said, "Mr. Whitaker, what you're describing is not tenancy. It's entitlement, and the law doesn't protect that." Case dismissed. No apology, no eye contact. He walked out before the judge even finished the sentence. Mom didn't come. Dad didn't call. The silence after that wasn't cruel. It was clarity. The cabin has been quiet since. No more knocks. No more expectations folded into casseroles or phone calls that sound like checking in but are just new ways to ask for things. The rosemary in Meryl's garden is blooming. She texts me a photo every Friday like it's tradition now. Says it smells like something earned. I keep it. Not the photo, just the habit of noticing what I've built, of being proud of how I got here, and of not apologizing for choosing peace. Sometimes you spend your whole life being the backup plan, the safety net, the one who can handle it. And the day you finally say no, really say it, they don't hear no. They hear betrayal. But that's not your burden. That's just the sound of boundaries closing around someone who's never had to respect them. If you've ever been the strong one in your family, or the one they only call when something's broken, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. You're not alone, even if they've made you feel like it. And if this hit somewhere deep, maybe stick around. I've got more stories. Real ones. Quiet ones. The kind that finally breathe. Thanks for listening.